Many assume that archives are places that store, describe, and provide access to historical items without bias, maintaining a neutral stance free of personal opinions and beliefs. For decades, archivists viewed themselves as gatekeepers of original documents who simply housed history for others to interpret and seek to understand. But it is important to remember that the archives and their accompanying narratives are shaped by people who, like all other people, possess both explicit and implicit biases and limited life experiences that may make it difficult to fully understand all of the perspectives represented in their collections. Historically, the vast majority of archivists have been white. Even now, the field is still predominantly white, although more attention is being given to combating bias in the field and in the archival collections. Some archives are developing programs to foster more and better professional development opportunities for BIPOC librarians, interrogating the structural racism within their organizations and changing job requirements for new positions so that people with a variety of backgrounds and experiences can be considered for archival positions. Some questions to consider when approaching an archival collection include: what is the history of this archive? How has systemic racism been reflected in the archival institution? Have approaches changed toward staff, funding, or collection development? By approaching archival research with an understanding of the ways that bias is embedded within the archives, researchers can better interrogate and analyze the items they are looking at as well as the context in which they exist. Bias can exist in many places within an archive. It exists within the actual archival materials, the decisions to include or exclude items within a collection or the archive, within the description and contextualization of the item, and within policies that govern how access is granted and the barriers that restrict use. Archives are often made up of primary source materials. These can include diaries, letters, organizational material, photographs, maps, and newspaper articles. Responsible researchers will interrogate items to determine what types of bias may have influenced their creation by asking who was the author or creator of the item, why was the item created, whose point of view is being shared, what viewpoints have been suppressed or erased. More guidance on analyzing archival items can be found in our video, How to Use Primary Sources in Your Research. Adding an object to archival collections imbues it with a certain authority and authenticity. Its inclusion suggests that it possesses a greater historical value because an archive has decided to dedicate resources to preserving it and providing access. Archivists have to decide which items are important enough to save and which they cannot dedicate space, money, and time to preserve. There will never be enough resources, staffing, space, or funding to preserve the full record of history. Archives reflect a set of decisions made by people. The complication is that there's no objective right answer to the question, what is historically important? Archivists, often influenced by their learned biases, their institutions, and people they serve, make decisions about which items and collections are historically relevant enough to preserve forever, and, by extension, what isn't. An archivist might not have the necessary context to understand an item and may deem it unworthy of collection, misdescribe it, or place unintentional barriers in the way of those who wish to see these objects. Archivists and historians used to subscribe to a notion that some types of historical primary source material were intrinsically better, more objective, and less biased than others. More and more, we understand that all items carry some amount of bias and that different groups possess more or less privilege and value certain modes of communication over others. For example, enslaved individuals may not have been allowed to read or write, therefore, those people were restricted from creating the same type of records as those with more privilege. Alternatively, some cultures do not place much value or authority on the written word. In each of these communities, oral histories are the makers of history in those cultures. When approaching an institution's archival holdings, it is important to consider how the materials found in archives limit our understanding of all participants' perspectives on a given subject or event, and what materials are less prevalent in archives and how their exclusion affects our understanding of the historical moment. We use finding aids to discover and explore archival collections. Finding aids describe the contents of a particular archival collection, as well as providing some descriptive and contextual information about the individuals, organizations, or other groups represented within the collection. Problems with these descriptions can arise when the archivist either doesn't understand the groups that they are writing about, or when their implicit and explicit biases affect their perspective and motivations. As a researcher, there is often no way to know who wrote a particular finding aid, so we must always be critical consumers of information when exploring collection descriptions. Many archives are located within or are associated with other types of government, academic, or cultural institutions. These access points may be limited by a number of factors such as language, lack of bilingual or disability services, location, which might be inaccessible by public transportation or have limited hours, requirements to present official government identification, and online systems may require sophisticated internet literacy. Archivists are making strides to identify and remedy some of the bias present in the archives. There are great efforts toward representing greater diversity of voices and perspectives. This has been accomplished by efforts to identify the gaps and missing voices within the archives. As mentioned earlier, archivists can critically consider collecting different types of primary source material than the types that they may be accustomed to dealing with. Archivists may need to develop new skills or broaden their understanding of working with various types of materials as well. Archivists may also need to expand their knowledge about the community they wish to describe so that they are able to provide more appropriate labeling and contextualization for researchers. Additionally, archivists find it useful to build partnerships and relationships with people outside traditional archival channels. And when this work requires the assistance of those from the marginalized communities, archivists must find ways to compensate these people for their time, effort, and emotional labor. Community archives are growing in popularity and prevalence. Community archiving focuses on building collections of materials that are created by specific communities, often encouraging those communities to be intimately involved in creating these archives. These communities may be united by shared culture, geography, history, or interests. Archivists can be involved in community archives in various ways, from serving as a consultant on an as-needed basis to being very involved in building the archive, storing collections, and building access. At its best, community archiving empowers communities to imagine their own archives.